Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how I painted the Space Marine Raptors Intercessor in the Grimdark style. This was a fun model to paint, even though I feel like I could have done a better job on it, but that's just me being hypercritical on myself like I always am. But anyway, let's get started. As usual, I primed this with Chaos Black. Next was choosing a green base color I liked. When I was at my local shop, I was looking at different paints and I couldn't decide which green I wanted, so I grabbed a few, painted on some helmets, and ended up liking the AK Olive Drab number 9 the best, and I went with that one. So I start by applying the base coat. Remember to thin down your paints and to do this in 2 coats so we get nice smooth coverage with it. And this is what that green looks like, all dry. Next I use some AK Black to paint the helmet, gun, and shoulder and some of the accents on the suit. Onto the white portions, I'm going to base what I want white with Citadel Celestial Gray, and then after that is dry, taking some Ulthuan Gray and applying it on top of that. Just like with every color, I do this in 2 thin coats so we can get a nice smooth finish, and don't forget to shake the crap out of your paint pots. Next color we are going to use is we're going to base the skull on his hip and the bird skulls on his belt with some Rakarth flesh. For the leather on this, instead of how I usually paint the pouches like on my past models, I used a different recipe, so I'm going to base this with Dryad bark. There is a small piece of rope that is holding the bird skulls on his hip that is hard to see, but I'm using Carrick stone to base that. Onto the metal, I'm using Iron Warriors here. It's my favorite to use, but any metallic color you choose will work just as well. And for the accent on the bolt rifle, I'm using Pro Acryl Bright Gold. Here I chose to be a little lazy and I based the bolter casings and the magazine the same instead of using a different color, but you can choose to do whatever you want. Before we start our washes, I dry brushed some Eshin Gray onto the black portions of our model to bring in some definition to make it look less flat. So after all your base colors are completely dry and cured, I usually go over everything with a matte varnish. This step is totally optional. The mineral spirits we are using in the next few steps won't affect the acrylic paint so long as you allow the acrylic to fully cure and that you have good coverage on the entire model so it doesn't get underneath the acrylic. A commenter pointed that out to me, and after doing some research they were totally right. Most likely I'll continue doing the varnish because A, I'm stubborn and it makes me feel better, and B, I do like to do it too as like a protective coat just in case I want to remove like all the washes, and I do want to try and preserve that color. But like I said, totally optional. After that is totally dry, it's time for our primary wash. I'm using AK's dark brown wash, but I was kind of concerned that it wasn't going to be dark enough to my liking, so kind of on a whim I got some Vallejo black wash and I added a drop of that to my wash mixture. I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out. The black wash is acrylic based and the brown wash is oil based, but it ended up working fairly well in the end. Typically I add some mineral spirits into the wash to make it flow better, but I tried it without any to see just how it would look in the end. Make sure you use a cheap brush for this, like not your nice sable ones. Once the model is covered with the wash, it's time to go in with the Q-tip and some mineral spirits to start removing the excess wash to your desire. One of my friends asked me why you use mineral spirits. So mineral spirits, to my knowledge, serve as a solvent to thin and dilute oil-based paints, They are miscible, unlike using oil-based paint and water, and oil paints are thicker and more concentrated than acrylic paints, so thinning them with mineral spirits lets you achieve a more workable product. Hopefully that's a good answer. Despite choosing to make YouTube tutorials, sometimes I don't explain things well, and it's really something I'm trying to improve on. Now allow it to dry or blast it with a blow dryer, and this is what we are left with. Now I may have done this part out of my usual order. The past few weeks have been really stressful for me, so I just don't think I was thinking right. But I'm going to go in with my brush and Rhine oxide, and I'm going to attempt to do some chipping with it. I usually do foam, but I wanted to get better at brush-based chipping. This helps if you have a reference photo, but I'm going to go along the sharper edges of the model, and I'm trying to envision here where the chips would naturally occur. I'm also going to try to add a few scratches and chips to the larger, flatter surfaces where I imagine debris would chip something off, or like from small arms fire or something like that. After that, we're going to create some dimension to those chips by going back to our base green and adding just a touch of white to create a lighter shade of that green. And I'm going to apply this to the bottom portion of the chip as thin as I can. I like to imagine my light source coming from above and the light would catch the bottom edge of that chip. I also took this color and I stippled some onto the sharper corners of the green armor to create more dimension. I thin this paint down quite a bit for a nice subtle effect, and we're going to do the same thing but Ulthuan Gray on the white portions. If you feel like you've done too thick of lines, you can go back to the base color and carefully thin the lines down with that. Next, it's time for some rust. Starting with some rust streaks, I started to apply this to our model fairly selectively. It kind of just depends on how much rust you personally want. Some people want minimal rust or even none, but others may want like the rustiest thing you've ever seen. After we have some applied, I'm going to dip my brush in some mineral spirits, and I'm going to start working it a little bit, removing some and creating some streaking with it. You don't need a lot of mineral spirits on your brush, just a super small amount will be fine. Then we're going to do the same thing but with our light rust wash, mainly sticking to where we have already applied rust. And then same thing of just like apply some, then get some mineral spirits on your brush, remove some if you feel like it, and create some more streaking effects, and then wait for it to completely dry. Now that the rust is done, I'm going to start working on the leather. I took some thinned down Gorthar brown and started to stipple it and glaze it on these pouches. I did that in a few coats and then moved on to Carrick Stone to create some more highlights and scratches on the leather. Moving on to some Mechanicus Gray, I'm going to start adding some highlights by stippling and edge highlighting onto our black elements on the model. I was a little heavy-handed here, especially on the helmet, but that's okay because you can use some thin down black and go over those areas to knock it down a bit if you feel like you need to. Next is going back to our Iron Warriors and stippling it onto some of the sharp edges to create some fresh chips in the armor, and then to also edge highlight where there's already some metal to create some more definition. Speaking of definition, I went back to my black wash and I just did some recess washes in a few areas where I felt it was needed, some on the armor and on the power pack. The eyes I want to be glowing blue, so I based the eye lenses with some bold titanium white from Pro Acryl. Thin it down, be as accurate as you can. Eyes are probably the hardest part of any model, I could argue. But just take your time, and if you overflow a little bit, just go back to your black and on the faceplate and just cover it up. And then taking some Talazar blue, thinned down with some contrast medium, started to apply it to the eye lenses. After your first coat, I did a less thinned down blue to the recesses to create more definition in the eyes. The last step, which is also optional, is a matte varnish. Some people don't like adding a varnish, others do, so it's up to you. I wanted a uniform finish, so I chose to. Now 10 minutes after I had finished filming this, I took another look at the eyes, and I was not happy with them. But I just went back with some thinned down black and knocked the blue back off of the faceplate a little till I was happy with it. And that is the model done. Looking back on it, I'm overall happy with how it turned out. I feel like I could have done a better job on the leather. I like the colors, but I'm not happy with the execution. I also need to practice my chipping more. It looks okay here, especially since I don't try this method often, so I'll have to work on that in the future. But hopefully you all enjoyed it. Even if you didn't learn anything new, I hope this at least motivates you or inspires you to paint your minis. And if you didn't like anything in this video at all, hey, thanks for stopping by at least. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe for more. I have a lot of models that I want to show you how to paint, including some Thousand Suns, Eldar, and even some Halo miniatures. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.